After hearing this, he secretly pressed the button to launch the nuclear bomb. Gene is furious. So this is the guy who bombed me too. He said he has been doctor, causing trouble all these years. In fact, the zombies have had a lot of trouble for a long time. Listening to this, Gene can't help but think about the reason why the citizens were furious. I think Dr. Gene had something to do with it. At that moment, the president spoke again. If anyone can get these tops to reveal Dr. Gene's hiding place, then I will appoint him vice president. Upon hearing this, the freshmen in the gym all got excited. They raised their hands and said they wanted to try it. Another 2 hours passed, and the spy never answered whether it was torture or not, or whatever it took. He just doesn't talk so much. That later, the image got weird. There were drums and gongs. Even an attempt at cancer. He has a headache seeing this scene at that moment. Full officer asked Gene if curiously, do you have a way to make him talk? And when Gene finds out that he is the one responsible for starting the fight, he said he could make him talk. This maneuver made the officer freeze in his tracks. By his side, he did not keep a low profile. That this sudden initiative today happened. That Gene wanted to find out why his men were going crazy soon. Gene arrived at the room where the spy was being held. He looked at Gene's system without fear, then looked away and said, "Come on, you can use any punishment you want on me." But after a long wait, Gene stood still and did not say a word. "What's the problem? There is no one in your school. I can't believe you sent that piece of shit against me." But his words were not finished. Yet Gene cut himself a small hole in his arm, with a goal, looking at the small cut on his wrist with a Disney grimace. He said, "That's all you have? I'm not even afraid of all kinds of torture. It's tickling me, Gene's," and did not get angry. Instead, he said calmly, "Stand up." When his words ended, the spy actually stood up. The crowd was shocked to see this. How did he do this? It turns out Gene planted a zombie virus in the spy's wound. As the virus slowly deepened, in less than a moment, the virus took over his entire brain. The spy is now a completely obedient zombie. He not only started giving his history, but also obeyed Gene's next orders. At this moment, Sexiel is completely astonished. She did not know that Gene had a special ability to manipulate other people's minds. At this moment, Gene wonders. The zombies were very peaceful before. Why are they suddenly out of control? The spy said that he spread the potion throughout the city, and these zombies go crazy when they come into contact with the potion. Then he will order those to fight against abnormal humans, thus acquiring the data. Listen to this. Gene wondered again why you are doing this. The spy said that he also did not know the reason. All he knows is that they collect data for the greater good. The crowd that saw this scene cannot be described as surprised. At that moment, Jean suddenly turned his back and said in zombie language, "I put a virus in your head. You are on your own." When Gene finished her words, the spy responded with a mumbled answer and then left. Grab your lunchbox. Gene's zombie identity was discovered with a tachyon cannon shot from the student council president. Surprisingly, he blew Gene's head off. Yes, in a moment now, using the power of his zombie virus. Jean managed to discover the whereabouts of Dr. Jamie with the spies, and also discovered the reason why the zombie citizens were furious. So when he left the interrogation room, everyone was looking at him with horror. Even he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, but he had lunch. The club president Gene looked at him with interest. At that moment, the president couldn't help but clap his hands and said that everything was fine. The first-year class is a true hive of talent. Then he asked for the chance to accompany him to record the vice president's information. Lukey, who heard this, stayed with Tanya. "Since when do vice presidents have to register?" Looking at Gene, who was walking slowly towards the back of the academy. No, he couldn't help but follow him with his men. Meanwhile, on the other side, 500 meters below the surface of a ruined city, according to reliable sources, our pawn confessed to Dr. Jimin. He didn't panic when he heard this. Instead, he said, "Come on." He was shocked by his words. Then he said, "Come on. Those guys aren't vegetarians." But the genius doctor went to the side of the lab and said, "They're just in time anyway. The experiment is almost done. Let them witness this big moment, the birth of a new species." The scene is once again from the side of the academy. the president is seen leading Jeans to an abandoned factory. At this point, Jeans looks puzzled. "Didn't you say you'd take me to register? Why is this still getting more?" Desolate Jeans asked. At this point, the president suddenly spoke. Asked, "When did you learn to speak human?" Jeans was visibly surprised by this statement. But before he could answer, the president suddenly turned and pointed his gun at him. With a bang, Jean's head was instantly drowned in a pillar of energy. Even Lanchi, who was following them, was almost killed after she slowed down Wool, who is shocked, saying that the president's tank cannon is really scary. At this point, the president looked at Jean, who had his head blown off, and muttered, "Although I don't know how you managed to sneak into the academy, a zombie's weakness is in the head, and you had the misfortune to meet me." And just when he is still convinced of this, Jean C., who was originally mobile, suddenly made a constant flash. The next, he grabbed the president by the neck with one hand. Fight the president was pushed against the wall by Jean C. Suddenly, some robots fell from the sky. They are firing a barrage at Jean C. The president took advantage of this gap to escape in a hurry from the hands of Jianxi, but the scene in front of him left him stunned again. The headless Jean C. crushed all the robots in the field. With his own hands, the second form of Jean C. is coming. Finally arrived right now. Jean C., after taking care of all the boats, the president outside is horrified. What the hell is this? A headless zombie is still so strong, thought the men who are hiding in the shadows are completely. At that moment, Jean C. suddenly made a power increase. The next second, he was already next to the president. But the president is not slow. He can counterattack. While dodging Jean's attack, a tachyon cannon is fired, but does not hit Jeans. President is in shock. How can this guy be so flexible without a head? But he can't think about that now, because Jean's fist was already swinging at him like lightning. Just in time, the president runs back and dodges for a few dozen meters to distance himself. "You're the first zombie that can make me give it my all. Let's hope this fight doesn't end so soon." Hearing this, next to him, he knows that the president is getting serious. Jean on the other side, at this moment, he suffered a sudden mutation. His head, which had been broken, grew back. The two snacks were shocked by this scene. What kind of creature is this? At this moment, Jean said, "Let's talk about it. I don't want to hurt him." The president felt the small cut on his neck, then slowly took off his clothes and said, "Your plan may have failed. I'm a robot. You can't control me in any way." When his words ended, several figures flew through the air. In just a few seconds, these pillars of light converged on the president's body. While the white mist slowly dissipated, a robot covered by a mecha was added to the zombie field. I hope you can hold on a little longer, because it's been a long time since I've used my full power. With that, he ran towards Jean with great speed. In a split second, Jean was hit in the jaw by his kick. Not only that, just before Jean hit the ground, the president instantly blinked below him again. The two men who were watching from the sidelines were completely shocked. That's the strength of the president. The president flew over Jean again. Then there were countless hits and crashes. Jean was punched so many times in the air by the president. When it seemed like it was almost time, the president reached Jean's body. Yes, in the blink of an eye, and then he stepped on the ground. Just as Jean was at that moment, a red energy light suddenly lit up on the president's chest. Next, a powerful shockwave was seen exploding towards the ground. This horrible energy shook the surrounding buildings. The president, who had finally stopped, breathed a sigh of relief and said, "This time, you won't die." But when the smoke cleared, Jean came out in one piece. The president was in disbelief when he saw this. At that moment, a giant stood in the center of the arena. Suddenly, he screams to the sky. The terrifying power of the roar made those who were several hundred meters away almost lose their balance. The president's master even cracked on the spot when Jean stopped whistling and slowly turned around. The duo, who were watching the fight, were stunned on the spot, because at that moment, Jean had already changed into his second form. Never mess with Jean with his hair, because he just casually turned the powerful president into scrap with a single blow. Just now, Jean has unlocked his second form. He has just appeared on the scene and made the world change. At this moment, a fierce wind began to blow. With Jean at the center, he is even affecting the entire city. Chance, when she saw this scene from afar, she was in disbelief. Lanchi, who was on the battlefield at the time, was so scared that she didn't dare to say a word. While everyone seemed perplexed, Jian, still in the abandoned warehouse, finally speaks. I told you from the beginning, I really don't want to go to war with humans. The president, who heard this, came to the surface, but when he was about to retort Jean, however, suddenly Rio has tilted his head and said, "How do you want to die now?" This bizarre scene was a shock to the Lancia duo next to them, as he not only changed his form but also his personality. The two then began to flee at breakneck speed. After all, what mattered were their own lives. However, the president, who was still in the field at that moment, not even in his current situation, I have never been afraid of a zombie in my entire life. After that, he called out for Jean to fight him again, at that moment, who had already fled far away at great speed. I was thinking, this distance should be considered safe now, right? Suddenly, a figure passed by them with a thud. The two people who saw this scene were instantly shocked, as the president was blown to pieces by Jean's punch. However, before they could react, Jean had already appeared in front of them again. The president ran to call his masters, but the robots were still in the air when they were blown to pieces by Jean himself, with Estranda, who was still in the air at the time, was also shaken by the consequences of the explosion. When the president saw this, he shouted for them to help kill these zombies. But Lan, who didn't want to talk to him, he is so strong, who would dare to face him? The three of them ran off in different directions. But when Ansi saw this scene, he didn't move. Instead, he raised his right hand and then dove to the ground. The next second, the earth began to shake. Ilankwi, who was still escaping to the outside, the moment froze in her tracks, because she was suddenly blocked by a concrete road in front of her. Even the president was hit by this sudden blockade. It turns out that Jean stood up an entire new city in development. The crowd was shocked at the sight. What the hell is this? There's an earthquake happening on the other side. Is also looking at everything in front of her in disbelief. This is an uninhabited city. Unexpectedly was raised at that moment. Jean's in the middle of the battlefield suddenly made a combat power move. He went towards the president with great speed. Just for a moment, Jean put a hand on the president's head. He then smiled and said, "How was it? Are you scared now?" Chance's subordinate finally couldn't take it anymore. He actually gathered the citizens to attack the humans right now. After Jean changed into his second form in just a few rounds, he easily took down the unstoppable president. At that moment, Jean said with a mischievous smile, "Although I don't have control over the robot, but its brain is not made of machines, isn't it?" With that, he cut the president's scalp with his finger. The next second, countless viruses of Jean took control of the entire brain of the president. In an instant, Jean read some memories of his brain. I didn't know that the seemingly unstoppable president was also a man. Poor, when he was 5 years old, his parents died in an accident. So the genius doctor captured him to modify his body from the head down there. Is almost no place that is normal. Seeing this, Jean can't help but feel sorry for him. He said, "He living, so you are no longer a buzz." That we then he let go of her hand. Jean simply let go. Lankway down there runs and gets the dying president. She is also in a state of shock. I didn't know Jean had the ability to read other people's memories. Waiting for the night, Jean runs back to the dormitory and packs his bags, while thinking how I lost control of my emotions. Again I was exposed, I better run away. But when he grabs his luggage and prepares to leave, Zyle, however, appeared out of nowhere and stopped him from going on his way. Jean is helpless at the moment. Obviously, I am a very kind zombie. I really don't like killing people. But with a single turn, he launches himself towards Azir. However, at that moment, Zil, not even suddenly, he showed an appointment letter. And it also said, "From today, you are the vice president of the Academy of Abnormal Humans." When he heard this, Jean was intrigued. But the appointment letter in front of him didn't seem to be fake. So subconsciously, he asked if it was stamped by the president himself. Besides that, he didn't say anything else to you, indicated, with a slight glance to the side. The president, he only said that you are a rare talent. He didn't say much more. And meanwhile, on the other side, No, who is shocked to know that the president is leaving. Jean's behind, however. The president says, "It doesn't matter if he is a zombie or a human. The main thing is that he can help us capture Dr. Genius. So ask Galanki, how is the deal going this time? She didn't want to say she's ready. We're ready to go at any time. Great. Let's hope we can catch Dr. Jean this time until she turns at this point inside an abandoned city. Ajus held on angrily. Our king was captured by humans. What should we do? Kill the humans. Rescue the great king. At this point, Jean's servants are in love. However, how can our king be captured by a human? I think it's just because Ju has too much time on her hands. And so, after a few days of peace, at that moment an aircraft carrier suddenly appeared at sea. The president was in the command center and shouted into the microphone, "Everyone pay attention. There's only one chance Dr. Jimin must be captured at all costs." It didn't take long to reach the ruined city where Dr. Jimin was hiding. But Jean took the Chelsea with him, as if he were shopping. Take a look around. That's it. A group of human armed forces suddenly appeared. As soon as they saw Jean, everyone saluted them. Jean was perplexed by this maneuver. At that moment a captain stepped forward, reported that from today onwards the 56th Army Group, consisting of 120,000 men, will only follow the orders of the Lord of Old. The vice president is over Jean's younger brother. If Ju is under human control right now, the president is trying to get the genius doctor. He gave a group of human troops to Jean, looking at the 120,000 humans at his disposal. Jean wondered curiously, what if I told you to die right now? Would you be willing to do it? With the words coming out of his mouth, the soldier immediately grabbed his grenade and shouted, "This is my honor." This left Jean speechless. What is wrong with this guy? And then a dissonant voice interrupted his thoughts. Suddenly, I don't understand. Such a strategically important location is being guarded by a little piece of shit. You better behave and hide behind us. Later, I don't want you guys to get hurt by mistake, he suddenly exclaimed. You are the president, the vice president of the Stainless Steel Academy. Meanwhile, in the transporter, a teenager in armor taunts implausible. No one is left in your academy. I can't believe you are sending a rookie to guard such an important strategic position. Upon hearing this, no, he immediately retorted. If you want to help, then help. Don't talk nonsense in front of me. That moment the president also approached and added, do you believe that this new guy can beat you up? This comment left President Steele's face full of disdain. You will have a lot of fun, and in a control room a few hundred meters. Underground wings, all of them entered the city. What will we do, Doctor? Jean smiled, evilly said, well, let's play with them. First with that. He pressed a button on the console, and numbers of zombies are arriving at the giant, and the others from all sides of the city, and that's when it happened. Suddenly, Green Hair realizes that it is a strange thing mixed with the zombie horde, so it is the blue one trying to get revenge on the humans. So he encouraged the zombies to attack the humans. But the next day, only one of them followed him, and after putting the gasoline in Ju's hand, he ran away. When leaving, he said he would not disobey the king's orders. Ju was speechless. When he heard this, we can't just stop the king from knowing these bastards without courage. It's not just a few human beings. Let's see how I'm going to end it. But only then the green gas that floated in the arrow made Green Hair sniff curiously. Was very happy with this sight. He didn't know that this zombie stats were ridiculously high. At the thought of this, Green Hair couldn't help but laugh out loud. Come on, let's see how strong you really are. Meanwhile, on the ground, the weaker zombies were quickly eliminated. Looking at the zombie corpses in front of us, Jeans is also full of questions. Chelso turned his head sharply, hearing this. I don't know anything about this, she said. At that moment, the president of Steel suddenly stepped forward, taunting. You are all weak. You better go home to your mommy. Don't stay here. You get in the way. But he hadn't finished his sentence. There was a sudden roar in the distance. Jean saw this and ran to ask, what are you doing here? But Ju didn't answer his question. Instead, she drank the gasoline in her hand. She was totally shocked by this. What the hell is this? She said. Suddenly, Ju pulled out the chainsaw that was in her hand. The roar of the engine was instantaneous. Suddenly, he knelt up and roared. Then he advanced towards Chance. Do you know how strong Jean's little brother is? If Ju said Chelsea, just a random blow hit the president of the baseball club so hard that he screamed for his mother. Right now, Ju, by mistake, and on the moon, Green Potion can't even recognize his own boss, Jeansy. And then he pulls out his chainsaw and goes to war with the humans. Zhu Rouge to the sky. The next second, the buildings around him opened up on Xiao, who was right in front of him, was thrown out of the building. Luckily, Jean showed up just in time, helping them block most of the attacks. At this point, what the hell is this guy? Zhu, who is completely out of control at the moment, screams about killing humans. That's good. Finally a zombie, but then Jean pulls himself sexual for the ride. Shell is intrigued and asks, why are we running away? There is no president right here. Jean said to himself without looking back, don't be stupid, this guy can't be killed at this point. Jean remembered that Zhu is really immortal, but their escape was seen by President Band as a fear of giantess. But he wasn't done teasing yet. Help a punch to the vice president next to him makes him fly with a loud thud. It was only now that President Band reacted. He then turned around, hugging, and asked, what is the situation? What just happened? However, at that moment the vice president was completely speechless. When he looked back again, help somehow got in front of him, and then there was a series of knocks and knocks, and the surveillance room exclaims, this is incredible. This guy's combat power is simply off the charts. And the president of the bat in the middle of the field is in shit. He is trying to fight back, but the next Julie slapped him in the face and spun him around. Then he kicked him several hundred meters away. And with a thud, President Bengay and the vice president lost their fighting power in an instant. Zhu came to them with another flash. He then raised the chainsaw in his hand and struck him. And on the other side, on the roof of a building, Jean. If the three were relaxing and watching the show, Chelsea screamed. Or not. It seems that President Band is about to lose his mind. President Bang, who was so arrogant a little while ago, is now being beaten by Aju and crying for mommy. The duo Selxiel is in shock with this scene. Zhu is about to take the president's life. Well, the squad leader next to him hurriedly asked Vice President Jean, what are we going to do now? Jean thinks to himself, while watching the movements of act, if I make a move, I'll probably blow my cover. He then turned his head to find officer and said, you go over there and beat him up. Hearing that being official, he hurried to say, even the president Bang, it's not for that guy. I wouldn't be serving him dessert if I went over there. However, Jean, if you don't pay attention to his complaints, instead, he bites her arm after that. Chelsea was confused or not. Will I turn into a zombie? Then she put her hands on her chest and scolded angrily. You're not trying to have bad thoughts about me, are you, Jean? If you heard that? She was speechless and said, remember to be gentle when you hit him. It turns out that it's already official. He's under the control of a zombie virus. She's already turned into a fighting store. It's over. Jean bit someone. But not only the bitten girl didn't turn into a zombie, all this because Jean is afraid to reveal his identity. So he used his super zombie virus, and he reorganized and improved Chelsea's genes. Just for a moment, official full turns into a battle store. At the moment when Zhu was about to kill the president, well, full officer a rock on top of his head, Zhu turned around angrily and asked, who is it? How dare you mess with me at this moment? Special Check approached without rushing and said, the one with the saw. What's the point of intimidating a weakling? Come play with me. Zhu was tonic hearing this. Then he said with a hard look, what are you? You are not worthy of fighting me. What's the problem? That's all you have the right to brag about. I'll finish you in a minute with that. Said Chelsea, immediately pulled out a special Katrina from his groin. Countless bullets were fired at Zhu. But what she didn't expect was adjustments that I'll make of the bullets with just a few random movements. But the club president behind him wasn't so lucky. Thank goodness he's wearing steel armor. Otherwise, even if Zhu hadn't killed him, he would also die at the hands of Shell at that moment. Full suddenly arrives in front of acted with an instant movement, then another 360-degree jump in the air. One before reaching Zhu's head, Chauxiel hurriedly pulls out 2 high explosive grenades. Then he threw them in the mouth. Zhu with a loud bang. Zhu was instantly engulfed by flames. But when the smoke cleared, Zhu came out again as if nothing had happened, and even mocked, saying, I'm immortal, don't waste your breath. But his words were not finished, yet he was hit in the face by a lead bullet with an evil smile on his face. Not bad, I was just warming you up. Meanwhile, on the other side, the squad leader asked with a curious look, Vice President Jean, what exactly did you just do to her? Jean answered, nothing. I just modified her genes a little, and this is just the beginning, and I can make her stronger. The screen is on the side of Aegeus. Again, even though he is immortal, he is still in a lot of pain because of all the attacks at that moment. Full official in the middle of the field. Suddenly, Rio, crazy sky, as if his body had undergone an evolution. Now he just wants to go home to his mother's. Suddenly, Ju takes the lead and runs towards Axe official, but he is trampled on the ground by Shell Combat Chelsea. Hits Aegeus's face with another glancing kick with force. The kick sends Ju voice hundreds of meters back. At that moment, Chelsea grabbed another bazooka and shouted, "You're not immortal. How about proving it?" At that moment, Ju, who had been beaten, stood up and saw the gasoline next to him. He hurriedly grabbed a bucket and poured it into his mouth. At the same time, Shell's rockets were also coming towards him, but with a flash of cold light, the rockets split into two. It seems that Aho's combat power has increased a little with the gasoline. And Chelsea was cut in half by Aguilar's blow. The president and vice president of the club were shocked to see this. It's over. She's going to die this time. At that moment, Ju sneers with an arrogant look on her face. I told you I was immortal. Be more careful in your next life. However, Jean, who was on the roof, suddenly raised his hand and made a fist. The next second, Shell's originally separated body miraculously began to heal again. The change was a shock to Angel's face. He didn't expect Chelsea to be mortal. This is the correct way to use a Gatling machine gun. It's a direct hit. Ju would be confused right now. Official Check was transformed by the super zombie virus. Her combat ability not only increased by several levels, she even has the same immortality that acted. See this scene. At this moment, the two presidents just want to go home and find their mother. On the other hand, the two are getting more and more energized, not with an evil smile on their face, and said, "Not bad. I'm happy today, so I'll play with you until the end." Ju, who heard this, was also confused because it seems that she, more like a zombie Giance who was on the roof watching, didn't expect. After Chelsea's genetic mutation, she has a lot of potential, but at this moment she is already all torn apart, and the pain of being cut in half is now real. We don't need to end this fight soon. Ju, since you are not behaving right, don't blame me for helping you. Officer beat you with Giance's deliberate manipulation. Chelsea's potential is once again stimulated just for a moment, and she is in front of Giance. And then there is a loud bang, a punch to the angel's face. This powerful force made him fly upside down. Dozens meters. Chelsea appears behind him with another flash. Then comes the hammer blow. He hits acted hard on the side of the head with a loud thud. When the dust clears, Ju has just left the station, and he saw Xiao standing in front of him again. At this point, Ju had no resistance whatsoever. When she saw that Chelsea was about to give her another one of his combo attacks, Ju raised his hands in surrender, and he said that he is going home right now. He will never leave there again. Jean is embarrassed to hear this, and Green Hair, who was watching from the surveillance room, was also confused. Suddenly, Shell dropped the machine gun on the ground. At that moment, Ju, who was hiding in the well, also noticed the change. He then jumps and hits himself Xiao in the face with a sneak attack. Jean is very angry when he saw this. What are you doing? Believe his nonsense. And as soon as you let your guard down, you will return to normal in no time. Chelsea, who heard this, was full of regret. She did not expect her physical condition to disappear so easily. At this moment, Jusa had a bit of an arrogant look on her face. Now that the effect of the drug has worn off, I will see how you will die. Jianzi, who saw this scene, was speechless. It seems that I still have to do this alone. And at the moment, Green, who was watching from the shadows, was thrilled. This zombie is very strong, even a sneak attack. So he controls the keyboard with excitement and tries to make help destroy all of them as Ju gets closer and closer. Just as he was about to kill himself, Help and the others, suddenly Green Hair realizes that there seems to be another person on the street. He stops moving immediately. Just when Green Hair thought he was about to have another good show, Help suddenly trembled and couldn't speak properly. At that moment, Jean yelled with a black face to Ju, "I didn't tell you to guard the house. What are you doing here?" When those words came out, the few people next to them froze their tracks. And at that moment, Green Hair in the surveillance room too was stunned, because no matter how he manipulated Ju, she wasn't responding at all. It turns out that with the appearance of Jean, if acted, consciousness was instantly taken back hundreds of years. This was his first encounter with at that time, he thought. Jean, if was just a little zombie, I didn't know that only a few years had passed. Jean became the leader of the zombie world. The scene returns to the present. At that moment, Choxel and the rest of the team are in a state of disbelief, because Ju, who was so arrogant a short time ago, is now so scared that he peed his pants. You know how scary Jean is in his second form. Ju, with his undead body, was only looked at by him. He peed his pants when he saw this scene. Green Hair was in disbelief. He then pressed the console to continue controlling Ju, but seeing Jean approaching him step by step. At this moment, Ju is so scared that he doesn't dare say a word. He is in a trance. He remembered that summer hundreds of years ago. At that time, he was still the king of the earth. But it was only when the guy who called himself Anxiety appeared. At first, Ju thought he was just a normal zombie, but the next moment he was being suffocated by Jean. From now on, you are my little brother. Is there anything you don't like? When you hear this, he acts out the scene with his head in agreement until he returns to the present again. At this moment, Ju is afraid to move. Now, Green Hair is furious, so he curses angrily. You are immortal. Who is afraid? But as Ju used to disobey Jinsi, and he was broken into pieces and hung on a tree by Jansen for hundreds of years, as cured meat, so no matter how the Green Hair blue manicure the body acted, instinctively tries to resist at that moment. The computers that controlled the zombies were blown up by Green Hair, and Ju fled the scene in fear. Crime was left with this scene, and the trio of spectators next to him were also Tony. As to the chance, he himself seemed intrigued. Ju, this boy is really amazing, he thought. When seeing his plans ruined by Jean's hair, he became furious. But when he was about to continue, suddenly a big hand landed on his shoulder. Forget it. These zombies are just an appetizer. Real show is just beginning now, said a deep voice. With the sound of his voice, several combat helicopters appeared 10,000 m away. It is the president of the Academy of Abnormal Humans. Lance turned to the traitor and asked, Speak, Dr. Jinine is down there. Yes, they are hidden about 1,000 deep, and the total area is almost 10,000 square meters, replied the traitor. No, who, upon hearing this, can't help but wonder how we're going to find him if he's so big. But she hadn't even finished her sentence. Yet the president of the Stainless Steel Academy next to her took out his sword and said, You'll see what I'll do next. Having said that, he was every helicopter as a sword who saw this scene couldn't help but spit. You are quite a reckless man, aren't you? But when he heard this, the president still advanced. Instead of retreating, he swung his long sword from side to side. In the next second, the wind from the blade was already spiraling towards the ground. It's just for a little